Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and as most of you know, I'm a retired judge. I spent my entire career in the company of lawyers, and so when I get the opportunity to have a distinguished member of the legal profession on our show, it's a great day for me. It's often said that show business is 10% show and 90% business. So lawyers play a huge role in the entertainment industry. And today's guest is one of the most respected and accomplished entertainment lawyers in America. He's commonly referred to as the lawyer to the stars because his client list is a veritable who's who in the world of theater, film, television, and music, including Linda Lavin, Frank Langella, Lucie Arnaz, Bob Mackie, Marc Shaiman, and some of the giants in the business who are no longer with us, including Bette Davis, Rosemary Clooney, Rex Harrison, Barbara Cook, and so many more. He represents writers, directors, musicians, and choreographers of such Broadway shows as Kinky Boots, Beautiful, the Carole King Musical, Hairspray, Rock of Ages, The Full Monty, Legally Blonde, and dozens more, including the upcoming Broadway musicals Some Like It Hot and Smash. He's represented the stars of TV shows like The Nanny, 2.5 Men, and Blackish. He's a much sought-after speaker and lecturer at law schools, and he was named Broadway's top legal eagle by BroadwayWorld.com. And he's been on the New York Times prestigious list of super lawyers every year since 2010. I'm delighted to welcome Mark Sendroff to our show. Mark, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Harvey. What a thrill it is for me, actually.
Mark, I must tell you that when I went to law school in the late 70s, there was no mention of entertainment law, although I think there was maybe one copyright course. And when I graduated, I would never have felt the least bit competent to represent clients in the complicated show business transactions that you have to deal with. Did law school prepare you adequately for the career you've had?
I had the exact same experience. There was one copyright course, and it was given on a Saturday morning. It was almost extracurricular, so it really didn't prepare me for anything. What you have to become a specialist by starting as a generalist. So I was lucky enough to get a job at an entertainment firm where I learned the business from the lawyers that I was working with. But I didn't learn it in school. I learned how to be a lawyer and how to look at a contract and how to take responsibility for everything that's put in front of you that you have to opine as to its worth.
How did you develop your expertise as an entertainment lawyer?
I got a job. I was very fortunate to have a job right out of law school. Actually, there were no computers in those days, and so I had to compile a list looking at the back of all of the playbills from the shows that I went to, because I knew I wanted to be an entertainment lawyer, and particularly theatrical, specializing in theatrical productions. So I made a list of every lawyer who was listed as the counsel for the production as I would go to see show after show, and wrote to them and approached them. And luckily, a couple of them responded favorably, but one in particular, a wonderful lawyer named Alan Baumser. And so I met him, and he gave me a job as a clerk. And then the following year, when I got out of school, he gave me a job as an attorney and in his office. And at that time, it was a small firm called Baumser and Oppenheim, and he represented Carly Simon and the estate of Lorraine Hansberry, and they were doing a musical based on Raisin in the Sun, it was. And Dino De Laurentiis, the movie producer. Those were the three biggest clients at that firm. And I started my education there and kept growing. I moved to a couple of other firms, or one other firm, and then started my own.
Now, a number of years ago, you wrote an article entitled, "I Went to Law School So I Could Meet Steve and Edie." So unlike many lawyers like me who had no clue what they wanted to do with their law degree, is it fair to say that you knew you were going to specialize in entertainment law right from the very beginning?
Well, from the very beginning, when I decided that I would apply to law school, yes, for sure. I wanted to get into show business in some way. I had worked a little bit in summer stock and college and all that, and as an actor, and I was not very good at it, so I didn't want to rely on that to make a living. And so I just decided that I heard there was a profession called theatrical law. My parents were thrilled that I was going to be a lawyer, and I was thrilled I was going to have a connection to show business. And it's so funny that you found that article, because I always thought that was a very cute title, because it was true. I went to law school so that I could get to know the people whose work I admired. So I thought it was a way for me to ingratiate myself and become part of the business. And so I did go to law school to meet Steve and Edie, and I met them and I represented them. So it's one of the things that I'm proudest of.
With good reason. What's the best career advice you received as a young lawyer?
Well, I was the one who was giving the advice, actually. The advice given to me was find a way to enjoy how you make your living. That's the combo that leads to happiness. If you earn the money and you enjoy earning the money, that's that. What I used to tell people who asked me, what would I tell other lawyers, and the advice I would give, it would be to be careful about who you include in your client list as it's building. Don't agree to accept every client that came through the door, because what happens is you become so involved with your clients and their lives and their families, and they become close friends, and then you look back 20 years later and you see that you're spending an awful lot of time working on matters that are not helping to earn a living. And so you can't really turn to people you feel so strongly about personally and say, you know what, I'm not making any money working for you. And so be careful at the beginning. The temptation is to take every client that asks to be a client, and that's, sometimes winds up draining your time later in life. That's what I found.
Well, when I did my research, I learned that you were one of the first that were smart enough to figure out that your fees should be a percentage of your clients' income, so that you're really investing in their careers.
I learned that from Alan Baumser, the guy who trained me originally. I didn't know that was such an unusual route, but it turned out to be unusual. But yes, I felt I was willing to, put a lot of time in and make no money if it's a client that I felt ultimately I would be earning well from if I change to a contingent compensation plan, which is what I do with most of my clients. You don't do it with a production, a theatrical production. You don't do it when a client asks you to draft a will or look at a lease. But when it comes to negotiating a conductor's deal or an option in a literary work, I felt it was worth. I trusted my taste enough and my exposure to good clients enough to rely on that. And when it kicks in, it's very lucrative. And, majority of the time it doesn't kick in. But ultimately, I think it's a better plan.
I love the fact that you trusted your taste, because any young man from our generation who loved Steve and Edie had really good taste.
Yeah. In 1968, but now we're talking about currently, and a lot of the people whose work I have always admired are very out of fashion now. I mean, a lot of them aren't alive, but even their work, it's my taste has always been a little bit on the older side, and it has remained such. And so I'll still listen to Steve and Edie and Rosemary Clooney and Anita O'Day, and that kind of music is still my favorite, and show tunes. That's who I am.
Me too. Now, many of your clients, present and past, have been larger than life personalities, to say the least. People like Bette Davis, Kay Ballard, Steve Lawrence and Edie Gourmet, Polly Bergen, Keely Smith, and so many more. I would imagine that a celebrity clientele can be very high maintenance and quite demanding in terms of client expectations. Is that true?
Yes, but that's part of the enjoyment of it. I enjoy the relationship that I have with my clients, and if they're legendary and larger than life, it's even more thrilling because I've admired them for so long and so greatly. I mean, Bette Davis was a client that my late partner Harold Schiff managed and was her best friend, her manager, and her lawyer for 25 or 30 years. or more. And so I wound up doing her legal work while he, dealt with all the things that career required, particularly towards the end of that career. I know you had Catherine Cermak on one of your programs, and I used to work with her. At that point, she was Betty's right hand everything, and everything went through Catherine. And but the others I knew much better. I was very close to the other people that you had mentioned.
Catherine is a very dear friend of mine, and I'm always so grateful for everything she's done to support my show. Do your clients have unlimited access to you as much as they want?
Yes. Yeah, particularly in today's world, with the email and the texting. And I've always worked on weekends. It's the only way that I could really know that when I start my Monday morning, I'm ready. And so I never had any qualms about calls from clients, off hours or personal. I have that kind of relationship with my clients.
Some lawyers say that you should never become personal friends with your clients. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that at all, and particularly in my field. I mean, that has helped me become successful and has brought me great happiness. I'm very proud, and I'm still starstruck. I mean, I have to be honest. When I'm talking on the phone, to David Hasselhoff, there's a part of me that's always going, "Oh my God, that's David Hasselhoff." It's just part of what keeps me ticking.
Well, I think if you ever lost that excitement, it would be time to retire, because you're also a big fan.
Yes. And I know their work. Clients like that I have one foot in the lawyer side in the shirt and tie, and the other side, I can tell them what key they should be doing the number in. I mean, I'm part of the business in that way, and that's the pleasure.
Well, do you ever find, Mark, that you're treading a fine line between giving legal advice and giving career advice?
I do, but my clients use me as they need to use me. If some of them have careers that are either so large or so non-existent that I'm the only person. They don't need to have, they can't get an agent, or they don't need to have an agent find opportunities. And so they lean on me for career advice and ask me to make introductions. I try not to hold myself out as an agent. I'm not really allowed to secure employment or to attempt to secure employment. But when I get a phone call for a major conductor and I say, "I'm sorry, he or she is unavailable, but are you familiar with such and such person?" And sometimes they wind up with a job out of it, and that's a thrill for me. But it's not something I want anybody to rely on me to do, because it's really not part of my practice. But yeah, it all overlaps. I'm an agent or a manager, or a lawyer, or all three, depending on what you need.
You've represented a number of big stars who were in their senior years, but who still wanted to work. Maybe because they needed the money, or because they were just addicted to the spotlight and the applause. Mark, were there ever times when you wanted to say to a client that they should retire because they just can't deliver the goods anymore?
Yes, but they know it. The reason why they're still out there after their prime is usually because they can't give up the addiction to performing, or they need the money, or both. And they don't need me to tell them that they're not remembering lyrics, or that they're not remembering lines, or they're not singing as well as they did. That it's pretty obvious to them. But some people just need to continue to work.
Now, one of your clients who kept working almost to the very end of her life was Kay Ballard. You appeared in a wonderful documentary about her called Kay Ballard, The Show Goes On. And you had such great things to say about her. She was really a phenomenal human being, wasn't she?
Well, Kay, I mean, she was not just a client. She was my first celebrity client. She introduced me to many other celebrity clients, including Rosemary Clooney. She was my very, very dear friend. We were besties. And, ironically, she lived in Palm Springs, or Rancho Mirage, and I used to visit her each year. And shortly after she died, I decided to buy a house in Palm Springs. And so the timing was bad. I wasn't able to be there while she was still alive, but we were close from the beginning. It was, 35-year relationship. I adored her.
Yeah, I really loved her too. Mark, I read that your all-time favorite star is Barbra Streisand, and you've represented many people connected with her, correct?
Yes, boy, all-time favorite star. That's hard to verify. I was obsessed with her in the early part of her career and in my younger days, and I still adore her work. But since then, I've also found other clients or no other stars that I've really loved as well. With Barbara, it was funny. I do represent her manager, Martin Ehrlichman, the most darling man in the world, and I represented Peter Matz, also the most darling man in the world, who was her arranger orchestrator. And I represent one of my closest friends is Richard J. Alexander, who is her director. And I've represented her sister Roz and her understudy Lady Kazan. It was funny. I felt like I was ultimately just closing in on her, and it was just inevitable before I became her friend and lawyer, and we were going to walk off into the sunset happily together as best friends. And I don't think I'm the only one who had that fantasy about her or stars of her magnitude. But so far, while I've met her, I haven't had the privilege of representing her.
When you met her, did you get to tell her what a big fan you are?
Yes, I started by saying, I'm one of those, so just prepare yourself. And she knew what I was talking about. And, we talked about how many times I saw Funny Girl. I said, I must have seen you do that 5 or 6 times. And she says, why? And I laughed. I said, because I was in love with you and I am in love with you. And immediately she started she didn't want to hear that. But it's the truth. I did see her many times as a kid. I lived in Long Island, and I took the Long Island Railroad on Saturday matinees to see all the shows of the golden era. I was really too young to be theater going at that point, but it was so easy for me to get on a train and go see a matinee. I saw all the great musicals of the 60s.
That's amazing. That's just amazing. What do you love most about your job?
The personal relationship with people whose work I admire so much. As I said, I am so starstruck that the most satisfying part of my work is, having them look to me with respect or share their lives with me or be interested in my life. Rosemary Clooney used to call me and just chat about her kids and what it was like, and this one, and we would criticize and laugh about it, and I just couldn't believe that I had wound up a woman whose work I love so much and whose records to this day I listen to most of anyone. She was asking me what I thought of this or that chart or this dress, or did you hear what my son did last night? Hilarious. And
Mark, I want to tell you something. I was a lawyer for 12 years, and then I was a judge for 26 years. And the thing that struck me the most about being in the legal profession was how few people really liked their job. Most of the lawyers I knew did not enjoy being lawyers, and most of the judges I knew enjoyed being judges, but for all the wrong reasons, to be honest with you. And it's so refreshing to talk to you and to see the joie de vivre you have and the love for your work. It's very, very rare.
I believe that. I don't think I would have been happy being a lawyer if it weren't in the entertainment business. And so, I've met many lawyers who are not happy doing it because there's parts of the job that are difficult and unpleasant. But I don't feel that at all with my career. And, I'm just extremely fortunate to have had the opportunity to build the practice,
Do you have a preference between acting for celebrities and representing shows, which is what you call production council work?
That's right. I currently, I'm enjoying artist representation more than productions. I still do some productions, and my partners do a lot of them. So, I'm the guy who specializes in the artist in the firm more than the production work, but we all do a little of everything. I have somehow become the guy for music directors, arrangers, and orchestrators. I developed an expertise in that without really trying. It just kind of happened. And I'm very proud to say that's a market that I pretty much have cornered unwittingly, but it's happened that way.
Yes, it's very much your reputation. You are the go-to person. Now, given the number of clients you have and the high-level work you're doing, You must be incredibly well organized and a very efficient multitasker, something that, quite frankly, I did not see that often in my time in the courtroom. Can you teach someone to be a multitasker, or is it just an innate quality that you're born with?
I think that's a talent. If I had to look at it, I would say, you have the ability. If you're an organized person, you have to figure out how many different things you could do at the same time. And when people ask me what I think is the reason why people think that I'm successful or why I'm successful, it's because I am able to handle a number of things at the same time, and hopefully not making the client feel like I'm doing something else when I'm actually talking to the client. So yeah, I think it's kind of, you either have it or you don't when it comes to being an organized person and using that to multitask.
Do you have to have a certain kind of personality to be a good entertainment lawyer?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think that's one way that's one aspect of it that is appealing, but you have to be a good lawyer first and foremost, and you have to be responsible in terms of deadlines, and you have to speak to people in a respectful way, and you have to be a bit of a psychologist to anticipate how what you're talking about or what you're doing is going to be received. So it is a talent. It is a talent.
You're one of the few lawyers I've ever known who likes your clients.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's true about other lawyers, but it certainly wouldn't be fun if every time I heard so-and-so was on the phone, I had to get on the phone. That's really my benchmark. It's not up to me to decide how talented the client is. If they're a nice person, and if they need my work, and when I hear they're on the phone, I'm happy to talk to them, that's enough. A lot of people will not think that certain of my clients are as talented as other clients. It's not up to me. I'm wrong half the time. I mean, I rely on my taste, but taste is taste. It's not fact.
Well, and it's very subjective, of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, Mark, you're involved in some very sophisticated and high stakes negotiations. I would imagine that you have to strike a balance between trying to get the best possible deal for your client and not alienating the other side. How do you do that?
You have to care about your client most, and you have to not enter each negotiation worrying what the person you're dealing with is going to think of you and how it's going to affect your future relationship. It's a very hard, fine line. There are many agents, and I'm not talking about lawyers, many agents who don't want to take hardline positions with a producer or general manager because they know that 10 minutes later, they're going to be on the phone with that same person about a different matter, or a year later, a different show. And so they're very concerned about not being perceived as difficult. And in this business, you have one negotiation that doesn't go the way the adversary thinks it should go, and it hurts your reputation. And that person is out there saying he's impossible, he's a barracuda, he's a deal breaker, not a deal maker. You have to be prepared to run that risk, because otherwise you're sacrificing your client's interests. There are types that hang up a phone in the middle of a conversation. Well, you don't bam, and they hang down. That's not my style at all. I rarely lose my temper, but there are a lot of people who think that I'm very difficult, and my clients will call me and say, "Oh, I mentioned your name," and they roll their eyes, and life's too short, and I was very happy secretly because they're afraid of you. That's not news that I really like hearing. I don't want anybody to be afraid. I don't want to be the barracuda. I want to be the guy that gets it done and that remains well liked, and that is a fine balance.
When negotiations get heated and you're confronted with bad behavior or immaturity or unprofessionalism on the other side, how do you deal with it?
Try to put up with it. I see if there's a way around it. I let my client know how difficult the negotiation is and what a difficult adversary it is, but what can I do? I can't remember ever saying I'll never deal with you again, or there are a couple that come to mind that I hope I don't have to deal with again because they don't get it done in an effective way. But that's the game. Be able to deal with the easy ones as well as the difficult ones.
You're one of the very few lawyers who represents not only the onstage talent, but also many of the people behind the scenes, like producers, directors, musicians, choreographers, designers. And you're widely credited for making great strides in giving theater arrangers and orchestrators the right to receive credit and compensation for the use of their work after the initial productions have ended. Mark, your work in that respect has made a huge difference in the lives of these people. You should be so proud of that.
It's the one compliment that I'm happy to receive. Thank you. It's an interesting story, really. There was a great conductor, dance music arranger named Peter Howard, and I represented him. He's no longer with us, but in 1998, and I remember it, you'll see why in a minute, he called me and he said, this season I have attended the opening nights of 4 musicals for which I wrote dance music arrangements. And these are musicals for which my arrangements are quite prominent. For example, Chicago, that's how I know it's 1998, because that's when this current production, it is still running, opened. Annie, there was a revival of Annie, 1776, and Hello, Dolly. All 4 of those shows were done that season. And he said, I don't get a dime from any of them, and they're using my arrangements. And some of them have reorchestrated the originals, and those new orchestrators are getting a royalty every week. What's the story? Said the story is you're stuck with the custom that after the original producer is done producing on Broadway or tours, whenever that original producer gives up production rights, he or she owns those orchestrations and delivers them over to the composer for further use without compensation. So Jerry Herman owned the dance music arrangements that Peter Howard wrote for Hello, Dolly. And when the revival came along, he allowed the usage of them. He owned them. That was the custom. So you can't fault Jerry Herman. But it doesn't seem reasonable, whereas a set designer retains ownership of his or her work, and a choreographer retains ownership of his or her work. So if they're ever repeated, a deal needs to be made. So from that point forward, I have always made sure that the arrangers and orchestrators I represent have an agreement, either with the producer or the composer, that says after this initial flurry is done, if you want to use them again, if there's a revival like the current Chicago or those 4 shows, if there's a foreign production, etc., you have to pay us a royalty and pay and give us a credit. And that has stuck. In one form or another, pretty much all representatives who do represent arrangers and orchestrators have fallen in line, and the composers have become resigned to it. And one interesting conversation I had was with John Kander, who wrote Chicago, and it was a show after that I represented his arrangers and orchestrators, and he called me and said, I don't understand what you're asking. I don't get any money when they use my dance arrangements for Gypsy. And I said, really? And I said, I know that, but really that doesn't bother you? He said, no, I think I made as much money as I was expected to make on all the original productions of Gypsy, and now when they revive it, I'm perfectly fine not getting paid. I said, well, I don't know that I would be, and I don't think my clients are, and so I hate to put you on the other side of the situation, because now you're the composer being hit on by the arranger orchestrator, but that's how I feel it should go down. And yeah, so to the extent I changed that, I'm very proud of that.
And I'm very proud of you for doing it. It makes a huge difference in those people's lives. Now, you've not only represented people who work behind the scenes, you actually produced a collection of Johnny Mercer songs entitled Mostly Mercer, which features many of your clients. The album was named one of the top 10 vocal albums of the 80s by Pulse magazine. Would you like to do more producing?
Well, that was a dream project, and I loved every minute of it, and the excitement has never left me. But it took a lot out of me. I was doing clients' deals from a recording studio, and where my focus and my heart was on, how is the track coming along. So I don't know. Maybe someday I would go back to it. I've produced a few albums since then, but that was really a major undertaking. I wanted to introduce some of my vocalist clients who had not recorded previously. And I wanted to reintroduce some of my legendary vocalists who were not recording at the time. And so I decided to do an album of Johnny Mercer songs because Johnny Mercer wrote with an enormous diverse group of composers, so I thought it gave us the most flexibility. Of course, he was, one of the greatest lyricists ever, but also there was diversity available if I did an album of Mercer songs. So I went to 15 of my clients in that category and picked songs and picked arrangers, matched them together with arrangers they had never worked with before, and did an album of Mercer songs.
It's a fabulous album. And one of the reasons I wanted to interview you was to tell you in a public way how grateful I am that you did that. I love that album.
Oh my gosh, that's a thrill to know that you even have heard of it. Thank you.
Now, I know you've lectured frequently at law schools and at the New York State Bar Association. And Mark, I just can't resist asking you what you think of the young generation of lawyers, because I find that very few of them know how to write properly. And even fewer of them are prepared to put in the long hours and pay their dues the way we did when we were just starting out. Now, all I ever hear them talk about is work-life balance, which is something we never even thought about when we were young lawyers.
Well, I think about it now, actually. I don't have all that much exposure to young lawyers, to be honest with you. So I don't, when I lecture, which is not that frequently, it's a lecture and it's not much of an interaction. And we don't have, I have a very small firm. There are 4 partners here and no other lawyers. Everybody here is a partner. And so I don't have that much experience with them. But, just noticing in general, several generations after mine in real life, priorities have changed. Everything has changed. Just like my grandparents and parents would say to me, everything that I thought was perfectly reasonable and I was learning and doing, it seems so different. With technology, with everybody so pinned to their iPhones and email, et cetera, and walking around, everybody's involved in their own life on a 24/7 basis now. That's very different to me. And I think that, people standing up for their rights, all the movements, younger people are just not willing to go with the flow that, that they're inheriting, I suppose. And, but, I have really not had a whole lot of experience with the young generation of lawyers to give you a comment about that.
I want to take you back to February 3rd, 2001, when you had a star-studded 50th birthday party with guests including Liza Minnelli, Bob Mackie, Michelle Lee, Kay Ballard, Polly Bergen, Jennifer Holliday, Anne Hampton Callaway, and dozens more. What a night that must have been, Mark.
Yeah, I really do look upon it as the greatest night of my life. I decided to throw a party to celebrate my 50th birthday. And actually, it was Richard J. Alexander, my friend, who thought it would be a good idea that we write a show for the clients, special clients that I have selected to perform as the main part of the party. First, there was a birthday party, and then there was a show. And so I wrote a show with a little script about little Mark when he was a young kid going to a record store trying to find a Mimi Hines album and a Lainie Kazan album and all this obscure stuff. And the script evolved into my becoming the lawyer with all the clients, and a number, as soon as the transition into my actual current day took place in the script, there was a giant number with a lot of the people you mentioned doing little snippets of the songs that they made famous. Leslie Gore sang "It's My Party," and Nancy Dussault sang "Make Someone Happy," and Julie Wilson sang "I'm a bad, 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 bad woman." It was quite something, and it culminated in Mimi Hines, who played Fanny Brice on Broadway, and Lainie Kazan, who played Fanny Brice on Broadway, and Steven Brinberg in his character of Simply Barbara as Barbara Streisand. They all sang "I'm the Greatest Star." It was really something. Yeah, it was great.
You have no idea how much I wish I'd been there.
Well, there's a DVD. We'll get together when we're in the same country and I'll show it to you.
I'd love to see it. I would imagine that you've had a lot of memorable moments in your career. Now, besides the 50th birthday party, are there 1 or 2 other special highlights that stand out in your memory?
Well, There was there was the 60th birthday party as well that stands out in my memory, because Stephen Eady surprised me and sang, performed, and rolled the cake out, and it was actually the last time Eady ever performed in public. So that was, I had a lot of other clients, Marilyn May, who's my darling. We haven't even mentioned her yet, and and Nancy and Mimi and all my gals, and Sam Harris and Jimmy James, an impressionist. They all did a show. And so that was really fantastic as well. But professionally, my affiliation with the show Hairspray, I think, is a highlight. My very dear friends and clients from the beginning, Marc Shaiman and Scott Whitman, when that show came together and it was so embraced and so beloved, and I saw that happen from the beginning, and to this day I still work on various aspects of Hairspray. That's a career highlight. And another was a show called Forever Plaid. My friend Stuart Ross, I remember him coming to my office and saying, I think I should do a catalog musical with like the Perry Como early 60s music. I think that's an underdiscovered or unexploited catalog. And that became Forever Plaid, which was, in the 80s and the 90s. It's still done a lot, but it was a phenomenon. Everywhere you went, there was a production of Forever Plaid. So,
well, it's the only Broadway show I've ever seen with a mini entire history of the Ed Sullivan Show.
Yes, I see that you know it very well as well. Like 2.5 minutes of an Ed Sullivan routine, yeah, with Popo Gigio included.
That's right. It's obvious, Mark, that you love your work. Do you think you'll ever retire?
Well, that's a funny question, because our mutual friend Lucie Arnaz plays a role in this. I watched your interview with her yesterday. It was fantastic.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And she is, a miraculous woman, and we're very close. And she called me out of the blue during the pandemic and said, "You've got to buy a house on my block in Palm Springs." And I said, "Buy a house in Palm Springs?" So I bought the house, and it became like now I love being there. I spent a number of months there working remotely. And so for the first time in my life, I'm thinking of maybe there'll come a time when I will slow down to the extent that I will spend a lot of time there. I can't imagine not working at all, but I can imagine working on a easier level. So that's kind of where I aspire to get.
I have a feeling you're going to be having lunch with Lucy and Larry and Ruta Lee, her neighbor, very soon.
Well, I hope so. Actually, she's coming here. She's going to be starring at the Feinstein's 54 in July. So she and Larry will be staying with me, and I'll be living that. But yeah, we're very close on whatever the coast.
Well, please give Lucy my love. I enjoyed every minute of her time on our show.
She's an amazing woman. I can't believe that she accomplishes all she accomplishes. She's just amazing.
Mark, when you look back at the last 5 decades, have you had the career that you imagined for yourself when you first started out?
I did not know what to imagine, because I didn't know any theatrical lawyers. I never thought I was going to be in a profession that emphasized academics. That was never anything I thought I excelled in or was particularly interested in. So I'm lucky there's a showbiz side of it where I don't have to, have that intellectual component that so many lawyers need and rely on. But no, I didn't envision that I would know the people and be part of the diverse type of ventures that I'm part of. No, I didn't.
Do you have any interest in writing a memoir?
I don't, but people close to me suggest it from time to time, and my first reaction is, who the hell is going to care? 100 people who know who Mimi Hines is. It's with all due respect to her, I'm just picked a name out of the air, but I don't know that my experiences are so universally interesting beyond my immediate circle.
When you look at the Broadway shows that you've been part of, when you look at the legendary, iconic stars you've represented, I beg to differ. My only question is, if you were to write a memoir, would solicitor-client privilege be an insurmountable obstacle to making the book as entertaining as you'd like it to be?
I don't know that I have that many professional stories that I would worry about divulging without permission. I think it's about the social aspects of my relationships and adventures with people that are known, which I wouldn't consider to be privileged. I mean, this is so absurd. I'm talking about why I think I can write this book, which I really don't have an intention of doing. I still don't think anybody's going to care, but I appreciate that you care. I'll put you on the list of the 100, and we'll promote it together.
Well, there's a very famous memoir written by a Hollywood lawyer. I think his name was Jeff Bowser.
Yes, I read that. Greg Bowser. He was Ginger Rogers' lawyer, and yeah, he was an old-time star lawyer. There was a guy named Arnold Weisberger who was that kind of a lawyer. Harold Schiff, who I mentioned before, my late partner, who represented Betty and Rex Harrison and Claudette Colbert and all these amazing people. He's one, but that was a real old-timey show business, when they really had power. I don't think there are too many that are being groomed in that way now.
Well, Mark, this conversation has been so enlightening. And to be honest, you've made me wish that I had gone into entertainment law rather than family law and criminal law, because believe me, I did not enjoy my clients in those two areas. Thank you so, so much for taking the time to appear on our show.
I was really, I enjoyed it enormously and very flattered that you asked. And I look forward to meeting you in person. I think we have some things in common, right?
I think we have a lot in common. I can't wait to meet you the next time I'm in New York.
Thanks, Harvey. Same to me.
Our guest has been superstar entertainment lawyer Mark Sendroff. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you to our producer, Steve Silver. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.